Captain's Log, Stardate 98265.26. We are in the process of honouring the 26th anniversary of Star Trek Generations, a movie that would unite two generations of Star Trek continuity, that would see the original series William Shatner's James T. Kirk playing opposite the next generation of Patrick Stewart's Jean-Luc Picard. I have been informed that since this would be the meeting of old and new, I would be accompanied by someone to help review this movie, but the identity of this reviewer would not be revealed until now. Energize, number one. Hi. Oh no, not you again. Wait, are you Captain Rikaku? No. He's in command of the starship Hogan. Well then, who are you? Retro. It's modern. How long has it been? Apparently not long enough, and... Wait a minute. Are you representing Shatner with that cadence? No more than you're representing Patrick Stewart, with the shaved head. Touché. How about we commence this review, and I can be on my way. Make it so. In Star Trek lore, it's a difficult enough task to follow in the footsteps of the cast of the original crew of the Enterprise that had 3 seasons in the 1960s, and to the 6 movies that followed from said series. The way that I understand the Next Generation continuity, or the continuation of the story, dependent on your viewpoint, was not about trying to outdo what Captain Kirk and his crew had established, but rather Captain Jean-Luc Picard and his crew establishing their own legacy. If Kirk represented fire and passion and leaping before looking, then Picard was the embodiment of rationality and wisdom. Exactly. Retro, do you recall what I told you in 2014? The 67 offering Thunderbirds Are Go shows a higher production value of the TV series that incorporated, at the time, the latest marionette techniques used from Captain Scarlet, with more realistic eye and lip movements. Just a pity they were all wooden. Really? Oh, come on! That joke came with no strings attached! Okay, I'm gonna make this real simple. You make any more jokes like that, and I'll find a way to keep you in 2004 and watch that movie on a continuous loop. I'll be good. You know, that punishment still stands if you don't cease with that. My gosh, man! I'm a reviewer, not a masochist! Did you just go from Kirk to Bones? Yes. Anyway, the problem with trying to bring these two captains together is one that has to be somewhat convincing, as the story establishes that the next generation is separated by 7 decades from the events that took place with the christening of the Enterprise B, of which Kirk, Chekhov, and Scott were there as honoured guests. And to have it where Kirk has essentially been taken to this temporal existence known as the Nexus, when many presume that he died saving the Enterprise B, was probably the most plausible scenario outside of time travelling, which the franchise had done before from the original series episode Tomorrow is Yesterday and Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. This is something that the Next Generation would also do in Star Trek VII First Contact, where the Enterprise E would travel back in time with the Borg trying to stop them from preventing first contact with the Vulcans. I feel like Tolian Soren as the El-Orion scientist was just there as the means of setting up the meeting of Kirk and Picard. Aside from him being a connection to the past with the temporal rift incident with the Enterprise B, he's just there as padding. Also, the writing doesn't do this character any favours, as he just comes across as one-note and bland with how he just wants to talk about his plans to get back into the Nexus, and that's pretty much it for him. Now, had this been written with the depth of Khan or Q, then you would have had something more intriguing, because you never knew what you were going to get with Q and how he was able to manipulate reality to his whim. There are themes of wanting to make a difference, giving up the very things that mean the most to you, and making the best use of your time and existence whilst you have it, which is something Picard comes to appreciate. He had been met with the news that his brother and nephew had died in a fire at the start, and realizing that the family name would cease with him. Playing into the theme of giving up the things that mean the most to you, you'd have to have a solid reserve of character to be given everything you ever wanted in a wife and children and experience a magical Christmas morning knowing it would give you the most joy. All to return to the battlefield because you know it's the right thing to do. That takes character. For Kirk, he was looking to find meaning and be able to make a difference after having retired from Starfleet and not wanting to leave the bridge of his Enterprise in his time. I did find it amusing for a bit of humour that we deviate away from the plot for an episode of Cooking with Kirk and Picard. I wonder if he'll be making Eggs Benedict with a cup of Earl Grey, hot. Perfect. Despite the limited screen time that both captains have together, the writing provides a lot of good moments and banter between them. And I wish it would have been a little bit longer because it would have been amazing if Kirk had been able to step aboard the Enterprise D just to see what the future would have held for the lineage of the name of his ship. And there's the subplot of Data's growth from learning and experiencing emotions after not grasping the concepts of humour during Worf's promotion when he pushes Dr. Crusher overboard in the holodeck. Data's story, I think, shows what it means to be human and what it means to feel emotion, humour, sadness, regret, and joy when he's reunited with his cat, Spot. It's that sense of how to maintain these emotions while also acting accordingly in your line of work. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. The writing generally is pleasing. I think had the angle of Soren been improved, then we would have had a much better story. Since this has such an ensemble group, we're going to be focusing on the principal cast members since there's so much to unpack from this. When you look back at the Next Generation series and these movies, no one could have played Picard better than the immortal Patrick Stewart. Each of the principal characters go on an emotional journey throughout this story. Stewart really shows the less than seen vulnerable side of Captain Picard when he's given the tragic news of the death of his brother and nephew from France, and realizing there will be no more Picards, as he is the last to carry the family name. What can you say? Shatner is Star Trek. People may have exaggerated his impersonations over the years, from The Simpsons and even Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, but no one understands his character better than he. You enjoyed that way too much. But of course. William conveys the sense of what Kirk feels when he's had to retire and feels something is lacking when he's not able to make a difference. The way he interacts with Stewart's Picard is something that most had wanted to see when Next Generation debuted in the late 80s. Two generations of captains uniting to make a difference. Star Trek, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist. Retro, that's Knight Rider. Why, yes it is. Could you imagine Shatner as Michael Knight? Not really. Maybe Brent Spiner as Kit. The story of Data is something I think a lot of people can relate to when they're not able to comprehend certain levels of humour. It's in a similar vein for some introverts that will hear a joke that is amusing to others, but are not able to grasp the joke, even if it's been explained to them. But then again, if a joke is explained to you, the joke is dead. I've only ever seen this actor in one other movie, and that was Tank Girl. And the less we say about that, the better. And even in that movie, he uses the same range, pitch, and cadence as he does in this movie. I appreciate if you're good at something, you should stick to it, but via the same token, you should vary your range just to show you can be versatile. And in this movie, McDowell just comes across as bland, boring, and uninterested with his performance. For the limited screen time she has, Whoopi Goldberg gives a good performance as she reprises her role as Guinan as the only other link to the past with pivotal information about Soren and the Nexus to Picard. The rest of the cast, from James Doohan, Walter Koenig, Gates McFadden, LeVar Barton, Marina Sirtis, and Jonathan Frakes all turning great performances because they know their characters inside and out. And if you have a keen eye, you can spot Jeanette Goldstein as the stepmom from Terminator 2, Tim Russ would go on to play Tuvok in Star Trek Voyager, and Glenn Morshower would go on to play Colonel Sharp in 2007's Transformers. By this point in 1994, Paramount Pictures really knew how to do decent effects both practically and digitally for Star Trek, with the launch of the Enterprise B in the 23rd century, and to the Enterprise D in the 24th century. The Nexus ribbon is the most the movie has with visual effects, as the Enterprise B and D and the Klingon Warbird were still using traditional effects as they had been using from the Next Generation and Kirk movies. Although, the final battle of the movie between the Enterprise D and the Klingon Warbird is done with traditional motion control. And this is done of having more control over visual effects and animation and producing a much more natural movement of the camera within a small amount of time and being cost effective. The saucer section of the Enterprise crashing was done with a real model outdoors, which benefited ILM as this gave them great use of natural light. The effects of beaming still look great, as by this point in the 90s, you couldn't make teleporting look bad in Star Trek. Dennis McCarthy did a fine job of making the score almost like a character, which added a lot of weight and substance to the movie. Such as? It really adds a lot of sorrow when it sets in that Kirk is gone at the start, and these moments when Picard is greeted with the news of his family and to the joy he experiences when he has Christmas with his family in the Nexus. Kirk's death was made more moving by the score that is used as you see him slipping away after helping Picard to make a difference, and to seeing Picard leaving Kirk's Starfleet badge on the top of his makeshift grave on the top of the mountain on Viridian 3. It did its job. Satisfactorily. Captain's Log, Epilogue. My younger self and I have both concluded that Generations was at the very least a satisfying movie, even though there are elements that could have been improved with the writing. The movie made a profit of $118 million against a budget of $35 million. Adjusted for inflation, and it would be worth $207 million today. It was met with mixed criticism from fans and critics alike, citing that Kirk's lack of presence was a detriment, and more of his presence may have led to some interesting scenarios. The subplot of Data's emotion chip was another good highlight, as it showed Data's growth and evolution as an android that had endeavored to become more human and what it meant to feel emotions. It's worth noting that Kirk's death had to be reshot due to the negative reaction of test audiences that found it more engaging when Kirk sacrificed himself as opposed to just being shot in the back. The scenes of Generations for the cast of Next Generation began filming 4 days after the series had finished filming. One thing that some fans found jarring is the inconsistency of the uniforms from Next Generation. They would be wearing what had been seen on the show and then switch up to the new uniform where the colors were reversed, where black would be the main color with the applicable colors of Commander or First Officer or Captain would be the trim, and then back to the TV costumes. The movie would be followed with 3 sequels: Star Trek First Contact in 1996, Star Trek Insurrection in 1998, and Star Trek Nemesis in 2002, before the movie franchise went into hiatus before being rebooted in 2009 with J.J. Abrams' Star Trek that featured Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto as Captain James T. Kirk and Spock, respectively. The movie has been enjoyed by fans since 1994 on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. Guess I'll beam on out of here. Make it so. Thank gosh for that. We've been MJ Knight, and we boldly reviewed Star Trek Generations. Exactly. Simpson, excellent. Coming up on Songs of Shadow. You could stand my umbrella, Ella, A. That was for you, Raiden. I wonder if he'll be making Eggs Benedict. I'm enjoying this way too much. That one. Okay. And then begins the second phase tomorrow, when all this comes off. Doing this for you, Raiden. With a cup of Earl Grey, hot. Perfect.